So my name is Brett Jestrow. My position is Director of Collections, which basically means I oversee kind of the horticulture and diversity, exhibits, and a bit of the herbarium and some of the scientific side. So
that's exciting. That's a big...
I get to play around all sorts of things. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm here every day, always looking at plants. And I want to start off here kind of in the desert plot with a really fun, kind of goofy plant that I don't think many people are going to recognize.
I don't recognize it.
And so the name is Plumeria, Microfila. And it has this really wild, wacky, sort of zigzaggy growth habit. It reminds me almost of like Madagascar.
Yes.
Something in the Didieraceae or one of these kooky groups. But this is actually Caribbean, and it's known from Hispaniola in Cuba, but has become quite rare. In Cuba, there's no known wild locality right now. Same with the Dominican Republic. But this is collected in seed actually from the extremity of northwest Haiti.
Wow.
And found maybe a couple dozen plants.
And what kind of habitat in northwest Haiti?
Totally lowlands.
Really?
So a lot of times people hear about, it's 98% deforested.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that. But it was also really a forestry term looking at basal areas. So when you get into the real lowlands, a hard scrub, or you have agaves and these sort of almost like desert plants growing, there's quite a bit of the habitat in the northwest area. And what this is, and what's bizarre is, you may have trouble guessing the family. This is actually in the Malvaceae, but in the clade, the Sterculioideae. So we think of cacao.
Yeah.
So
Malvaceae, would that be more like the mallows?
This is a mallow.
Yeah,
okay. But it's not in the typical Malvoideae subgroup. So we're literally looking at related to chocolate. And if we look at photos of chocolate flowers, you'll actually see they're quite similar.
Yeah.
Except this one does not have a chocolate fruit. It's actually kind of like a schizocarp, which pops apart. And each one has one seed.
Wow.
It's not really sure what the disperser is. It's not really hooks, but it looks like it kind of maybe could hook maybe a little mammal or something like that. Certainly it's not very good at dispersing. It's very local and rare. And we've been growing them, and we actually planted two next to each other because we were never getting any seed set. So they may be self-incompatible. Putting them very close together, we're able to get some seed for the first time, hopefully get some of these growing. But anyway, a really wacky, fun, zigzaggy, with this kind of growth habit. Almost reminds me of a juniper from the Mediterranean.
I was just gonna say, it feels like the junipers that I have even in the Northeast,
right.
They're very columnar. Yeah, even the bark actually kind of gives it a little bit more of a...
It's got that feel.
Yeah.
It's just got this wild zigzag.
Red, like a cedar kind of esque type of stature, yeah.
So this guy likes it hot, dry, but it can take summer rains, and that's why it does well here. That's kind of a theme here at Fairchild when we look at more of our desert and arid plants. They have to be summer growers. And so we kind of look for these just odd groups that can handle that summer rains, but need a lot of dry time in the winter. This likes drainage, it's very salt tolerant.
Is that another one behind it, actually?
Yes, we got a little group here.
I see, okay.
Again, that was kind of one of our first trial plantings. These are all from the first wild collected seed lot. So we actually kind of kept them in the nursery for a while, and that's why we have different sizes. They definitely grow faster in the ground with sand. So here, we've kind of have a little experimental planting, which Chad and I were working on. And to kind of push the envelope in some of these summer growers of succulents that we really like from places like Socotra and Somalia, where it can get pretty hot and dry. And if we put them in the ground, they tend to rot in a couple of years. So we started using some deep, narrow pots and using almost pure perlite. And it's really worked for certain plants. Some, if you're sort of a collector of succulents, you may recognize the Dorstenia gigas. Again, we had a little cold weather last week, so some things are just starting to lose some leaves, but done really well. So this is Socotra, and again, we don't irrigate it, so this is long term. One reason by avoiding organics and using basically pure perlite is that it doesn't break down to CO2 and start to collapse. So it stays up, and it keeps it aerated when we have a lot of rain. And I think that's what makes a difference. This guy would probably rot in the ground. We've tried it before. We also have some other novelties. This is another Caribbean plant. And it's actually, let's see if I can find it. Doesn't look like it's in bloom right now, but this is a euphorbia.
Oh, wow.
And it was formerly in the genus Camassiaceae.
Oh, bizarre. It's like very kind of soft and pliable. I didn't expect it to be because it looks like it's
dead.
Dead, yeah.
So Chad made a good joke. He actually says if this thing ever turns green, we get very worried. It should look dead, and that means it's happy and healthy. And it's got, again, it used to be the genus Camassice, which is now thrown in euphorbia. It's a huge genus. Opposite leaves, but it's kind of gray, almost with like pink blotches. And if you're a fan of euphorbia and you think of kind of the reduced inflorescence, the whole cythium, in this they're black. So it actually has all these little specks of black flowers, which are not in bloom right now.
Yeah.
But this was one I hadn't seen ever in cultivation before. It's endemic to the southern Bahamas. And this is about as big as I've ever seen one. And we are growing from cuttings, but I think it has a natural kind of bonsai aesthetic, which makes for an interesting planter.
Yeah, and is this meant like where it is growing just to be a sort of camouflage of sorts, or what do you surmise?
It definitely grows in Inagua. I've seen habitat, that's where we're checking it out. It's basically white sand. And this is just growing in little patches on white sand. Again, a lot of drainage, very hot, dry. Inagua's famous for its salt flats. So likely pretty salt tolerant here. It's growing right near the ocean. But again, lots of drainage with some summer rains, and we can do this with no irrigation. So it's something that's kind of low maintenance, long term, and we can try growing things we otherwise would fail with in the ground. One other one here, before we were looking at the Bitoneria with kind of the zigzag look. And when I said Didieraceae, this is sort of the group I'm thinking of. And this is the genus Dicaria, only one species, Madagascariensis. And sort of an oddball, again, hard to go, but now it's starting to, this is from a cutting, so this is sort of that shower effect that they grow.
Yeah,
they have them from cuttings.
This almost reminds me of a blackberry or raspberries, you know, how they kind of root and then they just start.
It's like an asparagus.
Yes.
It's about to shoot up and vine off, falling over. If it was from seed, and I've seen only a few plants grown from seed, they tend to grow more straight up, almost like a conifer with the hanging branches. But again, a fun zigzag. We love the family Didieraceae. We do grow all species in the family from Madagascar, the garden, but it's been hard to get them on display, some of them. Another one over here, just to stick with the family, this is another one that you don't see often. This is Aluadiopsis marneriana. And this is a cutting we got just last year, and it's just blown up. It's much more tropical than the other ones. In California, this can be a hard plant to grow, but again, with our heat and humidity, we can grow some of these plants really easily.
It's funny, it almost looks like a prostrate rosemary at first glance.
You wouldn't think Didieraceae, you always think those big sculptural, and this is kind of the climber. What it does do that's neat is it flowers, and they're all kind of like a bright fuchsia. So it's kind of the only Didieraceae I think of that's like good for flower events. This is actually a wild collection. This is probably something you don't see as much in cultivation, but you might know the genus.
Well, it's funny because it kind of looks like, if I just looked at this, it looks like a really thin Ripsalis.
Right.
But then there's an equisetum type of look to it, you know?
The equisetum type of look. It's somewhere between like dicot and primitive. And it's kind of right in between. This is actually a neophyte. So this is one of those three genera. Doesn't have fruits. It has seed. It's not a conifer, not a cycad. So this is ephedra. And
this is the ephedra, like sinensis, like ephedra, like the
genus
medicine?
ephedra.
Wow.
Yeah, but I also think of Mormon tea. If you ever go to the Grand Canyon, you can get a beautiful shot of an ephedra with a great background. Usually much more cold growing this. This is actually a collection we got from the Canary Islands. This is from La Palma. It's growing on like lava rocks near the ocean. So a bit more tropical in that sense, not fully tropical, but then again, this is something that will die first in the ground. It's sort of marginal because it just needs a little drier. This is Ephedra fragilis. It's kind of from that region, Canary Islands, and I think even into Morocco.
Yeah.
So that can be a little dry for us, but this guy does fine. It's been growing here for some years.
I mean, it looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of low maintenance on some of these. So again, we're kind of losing our leaves.
This looks like a cucumber of sorts.
It absolutely is. And you might recognize it. It's sort of, well, it's the only one in the cucurbit family that doesn't vine, that actually makes a tree.
Oh, wow.
And this is a young one. But growing quickly. Actually, just last year, it was planted maybe 6 months ago here. So it's grown from here to there. It's moving quickly. But this is Dendrosychios, again, one species endemic to Socotra. So it makes one of these baobab type plants. And it has little pickles. It's pretty amazing. So hope to get this going, get them bigger, and use them in more places than pots.
I mean, I know some of the fruits of certain curcubids are not that edible. Would this one be edible? You said it makes little pickles. I mean, I'm just curious.
The seeds are so valuable, I don't know anyone who's tried to eat them, but I suspect they are, though not all cucurbits are edible, it's worth pointing out. It's an oddball. There's actually fossils of it in mainland Africa, but now it's only from Socotra. And this is one in the ground. Again, you can have the drainage problem with rot. It also can get attacked by insects. And I think things like snails, even iguanas, things like to just eat right into the bark.
Would this technically be considered more of a caudiciform?
Yeah, I'd probably go a little more pachycol, but I mean, it's here or there, here or there. I often think caudiciform like a caudex, almost like a Dioscorea, like a big, flat, round shell of a tortoise with a vine coming up. But either can be used. Pachycol just kind of means thick stem. So yeah, I would do it. And that's definitely a group I'd like to showcase more at the garden.
Yeah, well, looking forward to that actually fruiting and flowering. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, we definitely got a few more in the nursery, and since it's working, we're going to keep this method going so we can get more. Actually, I hope to expand it into this area.
Nice.
Which would be nice this year. Always have new exhibits to do.
Got a little defoliated from the cold, huh?
Yes, a lot of the Plumerias just tend to lose their leaves.
In general.
Anyway, in the wintertime. They do have exceptions. What I don't think most people realize about Plumeria is most of the species are from the Caribbean islands. So they're not, the classic rubra is really Central American, and there's a couple other species. But the main group of species are really on the Greater Antilles. And this is one of them. It's exciting. We're now kind of at the end of the season, but this all has this really narrow hanging leaves. Almost
Super
feels
narrow.
like a pine needle.
Yeah.
And it's Plumeria filifolia from Eastern Cuba. We've been developing a collection. We actually had a graduate student here recently finish her PhD, Dr. Nicole Tiernan, who worked on the group. And so we've really tried to collect and grow these different sorts of Caribbean ones, which do better in our climate and can do better in many different climates. Sort of the classic rubras hybrids, you think like Hawaii, and they can do wonderful in Cocoa Crater where it can be drier. But again, we have these real Caribbean growers which like our limestone, and a lot of potential for back crossing and hybridization.
When you said filifolia, sorry, I just interjected, but is it P-H-Y-L-L or F-I-L-I?
F-I-L-I.
Okay.
Filifolia, so narrow-leaved. And yeah, so I think it'd be really fun to cross with some others, especially Plumeria magna from Hispaniola, which keeps its leaves year-round. So that would be a really neat thing here. So even if we cross that with the rubra to get that colorful flower, we could have a nice leaves year-round. But at least we're starting to get a nice species collection.
And you mentioned crossing them, so is that something that you actively do here?
Starting to play with it, yes. And we'll see what success we have. It can be a little tricky. We do have a nice hybrid growing in the garden that was done in Hawaii many years ago between a rubra and an obtusa. It needs to do more. We need more crossing outside the species.
You can see the whole form of it here. This one is also the same?
Yeah, we've got a little group here. Just curious if you're familiar with this plant, just personally.
As he
Chad was
sniffs it
saying,
off.
no, I'm looking at this guy.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is one that I think Chad had mentioned at some point.
Did you talk about this
No,
ever?
but this was like 3 years ago. I won't be able to remember what it is. Yeah.
Again, I'm talking a lot about Caribbean plants because South Florida really is part of the Caribbean. We're part of that Caribbean floristic region. We have a lot in common with other parts. And this one is actually formed from the Bahamas, from Eleuthera. And one reason I want to bring it up is just for its quirky growth form. People often think, obviously this is the leaf, but it's not. This is, you call it a phylloclade or cladophyll. So basically it's a flattened stem. It has dimorphic branching. So you've got regular kind of stems and these sort of short shoots almost. This is the whole kind of cladophyll type. It's really only from 2 clades, one in the Caribbean and one from Brazil. And this is a more widespread species and really tough. And what's nice is you can tell about it is if it gets very dry, if you don't irrigate it, it still looks lush and green year round. And when it does flower, you can see it's just got a little going.
Yeah.
It'll flower right on the edges.
It's similar to like a rhipsalis or,
Right.
some of those jungle cacti.
Exactly. This looks just like kind of like a rhipsalis leaf mounted onto a shrub. But again, it makes them very tough in dry times, and they hold their leaves year round, which is nice.
Interesting.
So an interesting group we're exploring.
Stay tuned here because we'll have more great houseplant home tours and field trips in the coming weeks. If you enjoy episodes like this, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell. That will let you know when another episode launches. Tipping the channel or becoming one of our illustrious sustaining members is always appreciated, as it allows us to reinvest into more great episodes like this. Additionally, you could check out our online houseplant materials and courses, including the 125 Houseplant Care Spreadsheet, Houseplant Basics, Troubleshoot Your Houseplants, and the Houseplant Masterclass. All of that can be found at homesteadbrooklyn.com or houseplantmasterclass.com. And don't forget that we have a new channel covering outdoor gardening, herbs, permaculture, agroforestry, and homesteading over at Flock Finger Lakes. We'll see you over there or on Plant One on Me next week.